What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Crafted Magazine video. Today I wanted to follow up our last homebrewing video on how to keg beer. That kind of went over the mechanics of transferring beer from a fermenter into a keg and getting it carbonated. In this video I wanted to show how I set up my kegerator. There are obviously a lot of options out there, a lot of variants on this, but this is kind of how I did it, and it's been working out really well for me. So the first thing you have to pick out when you are designing your kegging refrigeration system is what type of refrigeration you're going to use. You can obviously use a full-size fridge. You can use certain mini fridges as long as they'll fit the kegs you're using, or you can use a chest freezer. I think the chest freezer is probably the best option if you are having to buy something new. They have more space than any of these other style of just regular refrigerators and are really easy to adapt to hold like half a dozen kegs. If I were starting new, I'd probably go that route, but I got this fridge for free from my in-laws. They were upgrading to a new fridge. They didn't need this one anymore, so obviously free is better than having to buy something, so I went with this. And so I'll show you what I did. This is just a regular old Kenmore side-by-side refrigerator. It is probably around 10 to 15 years old, but the first step to turning this into a full functioning kegerator was to gut it. You know, any fridge you've seen obviously is filled with all kinds of shelving. This one had an ice maker. Got rid of essentially everything in the fridge that was not permanently installed, except for some of this shelving I'll probably end up using for some kind of beer storage. First step was gutting it. Second step was cleaning it. Obviously any old refrigerator is gonna be pretty nasty behind all the shelves and stuff. And then the next step was building these platforms to sit any of the kegs, or on this side I'm doing cold fermentation, or not cold fermentation, but cold crashing before transferring it to the keg. So these platforms basically just give it a nice flat, sturdy surface for your kegs or your fermenters to sit on. So these are just built out of pressure treated lumber. They're really simple. I basically just used scraps that I had laying around and glued and screwed them together. Obviously every fridge is going to be a little different, so can't really give you plans for that, but should be relatively easy to build, and they're really sturdy. The next step was trying to figure out where everything was gonna go. So I knew I had room for 2 kegs here on this bottom shelf, but I didn't have room for the CO2. I figured, okay, well, there are already these existing brackets that you can see there built in on the fridge. They're metal brackets, they're super sturdy. So I just figured, okay, well, I'll throw I think this is a 2x6 on top of it, screw it down, and that made for kind of a perfect platform to hold a CO2 tank. I could maybe, if I extended this shelf, maybe get a 2.5 gallon keg up here as well, but that might be pushing it. So I'm not doing that right now, but that's an option in the future. The next thing after getting a shelf for the CO2, I wanted some kind of tethering safety system. You know, obviously if this tank fell off this shelf and hit the ground here, or the concrete floor of my garage, that would be a really dangerous situation. I had this chain lying around. They came with some shop lights that I had installed, and I ended up using them to install the shop lights. But basically all it is again, it's mounted on an already installed bracket, and it goes around the tank. And while obviously it allows some movement, if this were to try to fall off the shelf, it would get hooked on the regulator, and it really couldn't move more than about 6 inches from where it is now. And the chain is really well secured. So that's just a good safety feature. You want to have your tank tethered in some way. Now, some people take their tank and drill a hole in the side of their fridge and then mount it on the outside of the fridge, but I didn't want to risk basically ruining this fridge by drilling a hole in any of the coolant lines, so I didn't go that route. So after getting all that done, the next step was to drill holes for the taps themselves. So that again was a fairly straightforward process. I used a 16th of an inch hole saw bit on my cordless like DeWalt drill. Drilled a nice clean hole. Then basically you just have some fittings that run through. I also added a little like 1x4, drilled the same size holes in that kind of a backing just to add a little more stability, because otherwise that's just kind of plastic that it's mounting to, and it wasn't super stable. So as you can hear, the fridge just kicked on from having these doors open. So then you just run the hardware through your hole and then hook up your tubing, and you're basically good to go. I mounted my valves there so that way I can cut off the air between tanks if I am unhooking one and that kind of thing. The last thing is temperature control. So this is a side-by-side fridge, so obviously there's two different temperature zones, but I'm just worried about this side with the kegs. So I'm using this temperature controller. This is the Inkbird is what it's called. And picked this up off of Amazon for like 35 bucks on Black Friday. It works great. Basically the fridge plugs into it, and then it plugs into the wall, and then it's got a little probe that runs into the fridge that I put inside a glass of water. And the reason you put it in a glass of water is because the temperature of the water is going to change at a slower rate than the temperature of the air. So that way you get more of a true temperature of what the beer in the keg is at. The cool thing about this temperature controller is it has settings to allow you to limit the amount of time between kicking on the compressor in the fridge, and that should help with making the fridge last longer, because if you kind of overrun the compressor on these things, they tend to kind of crap out on you. The drip tray I just installed on the face of what was a water and ice dispenser. Basically just ripped that off, added a little piece of wood, put the plastic back on, and then drilled my drip tray right onto that. But it's been working out really well for me. These tap handles my wife got me from Etsy. They have a little chalkboard area on them. I haven't gotten around to actually writing on them yet. I need to get some chalkboard markers. I'll put the link to these in the description. They're really cool, really nice quality. It's a pretty simple system. I've really been enjoying it. I love not having to bottle my beer. It's making life so much easier. I think kegging is definitely the way to go if you're gonna be home brewing. It's especially nice for parties and when you have guests over, just for people to come down and pull their own pint. Really, really cool. Pretty simple system. I think this was maybe one of the less invasive ways I could have installed this. I just really didn't want to risk ruining this fridge right off the bat. Once it does die, I probably will switch to a chest freezer. I can just have more room for more kegs and just more room to mess around with my stuff in there, because as you can see, it's fairly tight in there. So it's working out for me though, great. All the equipment is from Kegoutlet.com. I am absolutely super satisfied with all the stuff they sent. They pressure test all of their equipment before it leaves their warehouse. So I received the system. All of the tubing was installed with the little worm clamps. Everything was fully set up. Basically, it was just ready for me to connect and go. I didn't have to do any, Teflon taping or anything like that, and everything has been totally leak proof. And I've just been totally floored with the quality of the system they sent. I probably will upgrade these faucets at some point. That's probably the weakest link in the system, I would say. And that's just pretty standard with any of these kegging kits, just to keep costs down. I'll probably upgrade to a Perlick, or I know Keg Outlet sells some really cool German designed, American made faucets that are forward sealing. Again, let me know if you have any questions in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got tons of homebrewing content coming up. I also covered tons of other stuff, woodworking, music, all kinds of stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. Spread the word, and until next time, happy drinking.